All right, welcome to Burt's Basics, Box Elder High School. Today we are tackling tissues. Now, tissues is kind of fun. So let me tell you about how we're going to test on tissues in my class. So around this room, we're going to have a bunch of microscopes set up, and during the week, you can look at them. And I'm telling you straight ahead, the first 10 questions on the test are the following. Question 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, all the even, odd numbers, I guess. Your answer is going to be what type of tissue, and these are going to be your choices: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And then choice 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 is going to say which one of those. So what we're going to do is, for example, connective tissue. So say if the first slide is cartilage, answer 1 will be connective, answer 2 will be cartilage. If the next slide is cardiac, answer 3 would be muscle and answer 4 would be cardiac. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that you know these tissues well enough to know them on the written test questions and a little bit on the visual test questions as well. So here we go. These are your mighty 4 types of tissue that are found in the human body. So remember, jumping over here, let's start with histology. Histo is the mentor word for tissue, so histology is the study of tissues. We've already done chemistry, which is atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. Then we put them together to form compounds and molecules when we did bonding, covalent, and ionic. And then we got to cells, which we just finished unit on cells, which we talked about ribosomes and ER and Golgi and mito. Now if we get a bunch of cells working together, we get the almighty tissue. Now, these are the 4 tissues of the human body. You're probably familiar with most of these. You're familiar with muscle tissue, nervous tissue. Maybe one you're not as familiar with is epithelial tissue and connective tissue. So what we're going to do is we're going to take them each one at a time, starting with epithelial. You guys should all be very familiar with this picture of skin. Okay, you know you got your hair here, you got some glands, you got some blood vessels and some fat. But if we look, when we talk about epithelial, epithelial is the top layer of the skin. Now, that doesn't mean you only have epithelial outside your body. We also have epithelial inside my body. But if I could actually look at skin, this is a cross section of skin, and you look at this, and you're like, holy cow, I'm supposed to know that it's tissue? And the answer is yes. The key to epithelial is the difference between the epidermis and the dermis. See this purple line right here? That purple line is your dividing line between your epidermis and dermis, and that is called your basement membrane. Your epithelial tissue is everything that builds on this basement membrane, which is in green. So superficial or superior of my basement membrane. Now, if I look at this even more in detail, this is my basement membrane right here, and this is my basement membrane right here. Anything above that is epithelial. The next vocab word you have is the difference between simple versus stratified. And if we look at this, this is simple epithelium. Remember, it's above my basement membrane. This is stratified epithelium. Simple means one layer thick. Stratified means many, many, many layers thick. So if we're looking at my skin and my hand, do you think this is simple or stratified? It's stratified. I need lots of protection here on my hand. I got to protect it super well. But at the same time, there's lots of places in my body I only want simple epithelial so things can go through, like your alveoli in your lungs. Okay, when air goes in your nose, it still touches epithelial. When it goes down my trachea, it still touches epithelial. Everything in the world touches epithelial first before it goes in the body. Your lungs are simple epithelial, so that way things can transition through. Now, if we go back to this drawing, if you notice, I do have blood vessels in my dermis, but they don't go into the epidermis. So the next word you need to know about epithelial is, besides it's simple and stratified, is this word right here, and that is avascular. Avascular means no blood vessels. So if you look at your webcam really quick, if I take my hand and I just scrape down my forearm like that, I can see a line. You probably can't, but I'm not bleeding. That means I scraped a line into my stratified epithelium. What happens if I do bleed? Well, if I do bleed, that means I went under the basement membrane, which is a completely different tissue. So right now we're just talking about the top tissue. The last thing you need to know about epithelial is the following. They have 3 shapes. Okay, there are 3 shapes of epithelial, and I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. The first shape is flat or squished. The second shape is kind of a cube or a box, and the third shape is a long pillar, okay, or a rectangle. Now, unfortunately, we can't call them squish, box, and rectangle. So we have to switch those to scientific names. So the first one is if they get flat and they get squished, we call that squamous. Okay, squamous means scales in midterm, so they're just flat and squished. So if I say simple squamous, that means one layer squished. If I say stratified squamous, many layers, and the top layers are all flat. Okay. If you look at here, you're going to find that we have stratified and simple squamous all over the place. So simple squamous is just the flat-like cells that build on top of the basement membrane. Now if we go to the next one, check out my, oh, 1 second, por favor. All right, sorry, I'm trying to multitask. I'm a boy, can't do that very well. Let's talk about now cuboidal. In this case, when they're square-shaped, we call them cuboidal. So remember, flat, squish, squamous. Squares are cuboidals, and they are lining almost every duct. Now, a duct is a pipe or a tube. So when my spit goes through my mouth, that's cuboidal. And urine's going through the kidney, that's cuboidal. Anytime there's a pipe or a duct, it's cuboidal. And in this case, it's simple cuboidal. There's your basement membrane, only one layer on there. Those are cubes. The last one, surprise, surprise, are column cells because they are long and skinny. Now, columns give a lot more strength, so they're a lot stronger. Squamous are small, so they're good for letting things go through. Cubes are for ducts, for things passing like a pipe or a straw. And in this one, you can see it's for like stomach and intestines. It helps with absorption, so these are columns. Remember, I'm going way above and beyond here, but I want you to know more than this. You're going to get tested on this. This is epithelial tissue. That's one of the 4 main categories of tissues, but I need you to know more. I need you to know simple and stratified. I need you to know the 3 shapes: squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. Okay, so those are your epithelial tissues. And remember, they're avascular on a basement membrane. Let's go to the next one now we have, which is muscles. Okay, when we talk about muscles, you have muscles all up and down your body, but they don't all act the same. So you have muscles in your arm that act a certain way. You have muscles in your heart that act a certain way. Then you have muscles in your, let's see, I'm not even sure. Let's say arteries and veins or digestive tract that act a certain way. So what we need to do is we need to get our names of muscles down. This is the heart and soul. If you can get this down and get it mastered, you will kill muscles on the test. These are your 3 types of muscles. They're skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. And these are the 3 things you need to know about each one. You need to know what they look like, which is your appearance, how you control them, which means do you control them when you think of the signal, or do they just happen on their own? And the last one is where they are found, because I'm going to give you examples on the test saying what type of muscle is found around my stomach. So we need to know a little bit of all 3. So let's start with skeletal. If you look at skeletal under a microscope, okay, this is what skeletal muscle looks like. It's really cool. It looks like salmon to me. Do you see all these stripes in here? Okay, we don't call muscles striped or non-striped. In our terms, we use the word striated. Striated means striped. It's highly organized. Now, preview alert, okay, spoiler alert, when you guys get to the muscle unit, every stripe has a name. And we will learn all the names of the stripes when we talk about muscles. But right now, I just need to know it's striped. Now, the reason why this is so cool is because they are super organized. So let's take my biceps, okay? If you look at the webcam here in the center, my arm, they're all these cylinder straws. They're all these striped straws. And I can just think about them, and I can make the straws contract and go back and forth and back and forth. That's why skeletal muscle is so interesting. They're very organized, they're very cylindrical, and I can recruit 1 straw, 2 straws, 3 straws. If I lift a piano, every straw, and I can kind of control them, okay? And then when we do that, that is voluntary. So if you look, skeletal muscles are striated and they're voluntary, which means you control them. Another reason why they call them skeletal muscles is because they're always attached to bone. And here's your examples. Every muscle you have ever learned is skeletal. Delts, traps, abs, pecs, biceps, triceps, quads, hamstrings, gastrocnemius, any one you know is a skeletal muscle. It means they're striated and you control them. In contrast, smooth. I would argue this is the one we're probably the least strong in. If you look, oh my goodness, that's a disaster. I don't see any stripes. I don't see any patterns. It just looks like a sea of red. This is smooth muscle. We call this non-striated. It's a little more unorganized. Now my biceps, skeletal muscle, goes from point A to point B, back and forth. It's very simple. Smooth muscles are more like, okay, they can contract in lots of cool different ways. That's the benefit of a non-striated appearance. They give a little bit more motion, but it's a little more chaotic motion. Also, they are in voluntary. Now, to understand truly what involuntary means, your brain still controls them, except you don't. And if you look at your examples, these are your intestines, your arteries and veins, your esophagus, okay? You don't control those. If you really want to mess with people's brains, try to. Always say this joke in class. If you're on a date, just look at your date and be like, man, I'm having a good time. Oh, wait. Just a second. Whew. Sorry, my food's about to go from my small intestine to my large intestine. Okay, and do something like that and watch their face. Because they'll be like, you have to think about that? And you'll be like, you don't? Okay. That is smooth muscle. It is non-striated, involuntary, and these are the examples. So on the test, if I give you a muscle and say like the colored part of your eye is called the iris, tell me about the muscles in the iris part of your eye. Are they voluntary or involuntary? Well, think about it. Can you make your eyes dilate and constrict when you choose to? And the answer is no. So that is smooth muscle. The last one is kind of the most annoying one of them all because he's a hybrid. So if we look, here's cardiac muscle. I see stripes, which means he is striated. However, my heart works on its own, so he's involuntary. So he's a hybrid of the two. He looks like skeletal, he acts like smooth, and that makes him an intermediate. So there's your chart. So your chart is skeletal or striated, voluntary, attached to bone. Examples are any muscle attached to bone. Smooth is non-striated, involuntary, intestines, arteries, and veins. Cardiac is striated, involuntary, and heart only. Good job, you got 2 of the 4. Connective tissue, we're going to do a little bit more in class, but this is by far the most abundant tissue in the body, and they connect things. That's why they're called connective tissue. So if you look at this, we have dense connective tissue, which is really 2 things. That's tendons and ligaments. We have adipose, which is a fancy word for fat. Fat is a connective tissue. It connects, it's underneath my skin, helps connect my skin to my body. We have bone, which is a connective tissue. We have blood, that's a connective tissue, the only liquid tissue in our body. So connective tissue is kind of fun to learn about because there's so many tissues, but once again, they just connect everything, okay? Last part you have is your nervous tissue. There's units for all of these, by the way. So we have a whole nervous unit. Everything in your brain and your spine and your nerves is nervous tissue. So if I go back to the original slide we have, let's take a peek. You're going to have a picture like this on your test, and you have to label all 4 of them. As soon as you see striated, you go with muscles. As soon as you see all these nerves, which we're going to talk about, these are your dendrites, your soma, your axon, this is a neuron, that's going to be your nerve. I have no idea what this connective tissue is. Maybe cartilage or something, I don't know. That's a sucky picture. And then this one is your flat cell, so this would be epithelial. You're going to have to drag and drop on all of those guys. So congratulations, you have now mastered the 4 parts of tissues. Come in my room all the time and look at the microscope so we can get better and better. Okay, time for your review. So here's your review. Now that you've got them all, go ahead and knock these 3 questions out. So number 1, name all 4 of these types of tissues. Ooh, these look like rectangles. I wonder what kind of tissue that is. Cardiac muscle. Which combo is cardiac muscle? And bone and blood. What type of tissue would that be? Answer keys up next. Thanks for watching Tissues, and we'll see you soon.